So, hi guys. Oh, is this on? Hello? Yeah. Is it on? Yeah? So I'm in the hot seat today. So usually I'm in the cool seat to the left. Okay, so we can start with usual chanting, followed by Dhamma-Vinaya. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So nice to see everybody here today. And I'm guessing that most of you have figured out that I'm not, I don't look like Bhante Saranapala, so something must be happening, something's up. And he's actually at a Baha'i meeting place right now, getting things arranged for the Parliament of World Religions. So he would like to be here, but unfortunately had other engagements. And so I'm substitute teaching, substituting. And usually, I always make the kind of same joke, but I always remember when I was a kid what we did to substitute teachers. So always had this kind of check for the tax under Christians. And so, yeah, on the way here, it's been nice. I've been coming here for about maybe a year and a half now, I think. So I've been in the Toronto area now for about 2 years. And it's been nice to come here and connect with the community. So I actually met Bhante in a kind of roundabout way. A friend of mine knew him and used to come to the temple a lot. And so Bhante kind of phoned me up one time when I was in Toronto and said, I want to meet with you. And so then I came to meet him a couple years ago. And the first thing he said to me was, or one of the first things he said, I might have an agenda for you. And I was like, what? And he said, I might have an agenda for you. And so at that time, I wasn't, when you're a junior monk, you usually don't do any kind of teaching. Usually you stay under a teacher for several years, and they do the teaching. And your job at that time is to practice meditation and to try to advance. So up to a couple of years ago, I still wasn't into doing much teaching, and I just wanted to continue on practicing as had been taught. And so came to a dana one time, which is this, for those of you who aren't members of the Sri Lankan community, this is one of these things where all these people invite their friends to their house, and they have the monks over to their house. And so I showed up to this house, had been invited there by a friend of mine who knew me before I was a monk, and is also a member of this temple. And so I showed up there, and Bhante was there with all the monks. And I'd been to this lady's house before, and she asked me to give a talk, and I said, well, I don't really give talks. And so the dana was about to start, and there was maybe 40 or 50 people. And Bhante said, okay, so the dana's about to start, and I'm going to give a talk at the beginning, and we'll have the usual chanting, and at the end, Bhante Atalo will give a talk. So I kind of had no choice but to give a talk at that time, And so since then, Bhante has always been kind of very encouraging, very helpful. If I ever need robes, which is something you can't really find in Toronto so easily, then he's always been happy to provide them. In fact, this robe actually comes from Bhante. My last one was from Thailand, and it had starting to get holes in it, and was starting to fall apart. And so I told him I needed a robe, and he came with this one immediately. He was like, any color, I'll find one. I said, I need a brown one. So he kept looking. He's like, I'll find one in your color. Kind of came back with this robe that I'm now wearing. And so, I know for myself, having grown up in Canada, not having grown up in a Buddhist country per se, I was never really a member of a kind of church. Actually, I think church going has kind of fallen off in my generation. I don't know. I didn't grow up with any friends who were active members of a religious organization. Kind of have more this kind of attitude of kind of do it yourself spirituality. In other words, kind of this kind of thing, cultivating spiritual practice, cultivating wholesome qualities, is something that happens in our minds and something we don't necessarily need to go to a temple for, go to a church for. And so, as a Westerner, definitely had these kind of attitudes. We went to university, went to business school, and kind of developed this kind of striving attitude. Like, okay, there's a problem, there's 8 steps to overcome this problem, and getting through it is just a matter of doing these 8 steps, and I'll schedule my time and write it in my agenda, and after the 8 steps are finished, my problem will be solved. But coming here and connecting with this temple and with other ones in the area, especially, has been very interesting, because when we come to meditate, we can sometimes have an attitude like this, like, just strive through it. Kind of, this is about kind of, gritting my teeth, powering through. Enlightenment has these steps to it, and I'll kind of check my check boxes as I go along. And before you know it, I'll have checked off the last one. When am I going to finish, by the way? And so, actually staying alone, staying by yourself, doing a lot of meditation practice, this attitude is actually one that's helpful to a certain extent. You'll be able to set goals for yourself, set specific times that we're going to meditate, and to overcome obstacles that might arise in the way. But there's also this other kind of aspect that I've been learning a lot through interacting with the temples here, temples in Scarborough, and mainly just seeing how people do it in the Sri Lankan community, because I was never a member of a church before. And there's this very strong kind of warmth to the way that they interact with each other. You kind of become a monk and you're kind of automatically part of the Sri Lankan community. Maybe you don't speak Sinhalese. Have never been to a temple before, and pretty much the same if you go to a Thai temple, whatever. And this kind of aspect of our mental training isn't something that we can necessarily make an agenda for. Right? Can't necessarily make an agenda to say, I'm going to develop this kind of warm quality of heart, in 30 days. Kind of pick up, the 6-minute abs, 6 minutes to, warm and happy feelings. Doesn't necessarily work that way. And the other thing that's interesting about it is that it's not necessarily something that's all that individual, per se. So I noticed, for sure we can cultivate all these wholesome qualities on our own. But what I noticed being around these kind of communities, there was actually, this kind of van attack that happened not too long ago. And I was at this temple in Scarborough the day that happened. And the first thing that I didn't know anything was going on. The monks were really concerned. They're like, there's this member of our temple, and we don't know where she is. And they found her cell phone at this van attack. And they were the first ones to know, these kind of monks at this temple. And were extremely concerned, and it turned out one of the members of that temple was a victim of the van attack, and she had a young son. And within 3 days, that community had come together spontaneously, people who'd never met this woman, and they organized a college fund for this child. And so that happened on like a Tuesday or Monday. By the Friday, they had the meeting, and all this was organized for the kid. And I was there for another reason on that Friday, and I was kind of completely astounded, right? It's kind of, being from the West, I'd never seen anything like this happen before. And I'm sure it had in the past. It's actually, as humans, with the situation we're living in right now is a kind of unique one, where most of our needs are supplied by very specialized institutions. We need a doctor, that's supplied by our doctor. You need a midwife, and these are all supplied by institutions where people go through training, and we don't know who they are. But they do these things for us on the basis of an exchange, kind of exchange for money. So if we want to go to a doctor, we go to the doctor, the government pays for our doctor. We want some food, we go to the grocery store, we make an exchange for that food, and the money that we have to make that exchange comes from an exchange we made for other people. But the way that societies traditionally used to operate, of course, they had these exchange principles, but they also operated on what's called an economy of gifts. In other words, there's things that people do for one another that they don't get a direct monetary reward for. You can't put a price on it. So in the case of this young child, nobody paid the priest to organize this event. Nobody paid the people who are coming to organize this event for this child. And yet, just being a member of this community, this child felt that kind of sense of warmth, I'm sure. Even just me just stopping in there, I felt that and was inspired by that. And this kind of quality, this kind of thing, is not something that we can put an objective value on. Not just in terms of a monetary value, but we can't put an objective value on it in terms of time. And this is a really tricky thing for Western culture. Everything, almost everything, can have a value put on it in terms of time, in terms of money. If we want to do job X, it should take this amount of time, and for this amount of time we get this wage, we make this exchange. It's a kind of exchange economy. But when we learn to develop in wholesome qualities, it requires us to participate in this other economy, this kind of economy of gifts. So we don't know when somebody around us is going to need something. The tricky part is kind of somebody around us, somebody who's close to us, somebody who's in difficulty. It's just something we have to kind of sense from time to time. One of our friends might not seem like they're doing too well one day, and you just get the sense that this person, although they don't say it, they need a little bit extra of your time. And they don't want you to come up to them and be like, "What's wrong?" But doing this is where we learn to participate in this economy of gifts. And we don't know how long it's going to take to hang out with that person. It might throw us off our schedule. It might pull us away from our baseball game, from our TV match, from our dinner. But this is the kind of aspect of our mind, another aspect that we learn to cultivate in meditation. We learn to cultivate in Buddhist practice, this kind of intuitive aspect. It's kind of exchange economy that is actually an excellent economy to have. It's not bad to have objective standards of law, objective standards of exchange that we can know for sure what's fair and equitable. But there's also this other part of the mind when we participate exclusively in this type of thinking that can get neglected, that can shrink. And this is this kind of intuitive aspect to the mind. This kind of aspect of the mind that kind of understands things without thinking about them. And actually, if you try to think about some of these things, it gets in the way. That friend of ours who doesn't look so hot. What is it about that person that makes us think that maybe this person needs some of our time right now? If you ask somebody that, it's hard to list that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But we know this person needs this right now. And in our meditation practice, in our life, sometimes some of the most momentous things that happen in a person's life. They kind of come together out of nowhere. Couldn't necessarily plan for them. And yet knowing that that's the proper thing to do at that time can bring a lot of benefit. So in meditation, this is actually one of the aspects of mind that's necessary to cultivate, this kind of intuitive aspect of our minds, intuitive aspects of our thinking process. And what this actually means is that when we sit down to meditate, of course meditation actually does have an element of thinking and an element of understanding, but it also has this element of learning to make the mind quiet. Kind of learning to make it stop talking. So, the Buddha actually has this kind of analogy for this, imagine this kind of bowl of kind of clear water. And this bowl, can get covered over and put a bunch of red dye in that bowl. And you do this, you can't see to the bottom of the bowl so well. Cover up the bowl with moss, kind of water plants. And this bowl is all of a sudden not so clear. Cover up the bowl with black dye, with purple dye, with dirt, whatever it might be, and then stir them all up. And all of a sudden we can't see to the bottom of the bowl anymore. Don't know what's at the bottom. And our minds can become like this when we become engrossed in a lot of thinking, in too much planning, in overanalyzing, in thinking too much about what we should do, what we were, how we are, what we should be in the future. And of course, actually, all these things have a positive element to them. There is a certain time and place for that. But to develop this kind of intuitive aspect of the mind, we have to learn to make our minds settle down from these things. And what this means is pulling our minds back. So one of the aspects of a kind of exchange economy is we exchange things because we want something external to consume. Something outside of us, or reach out to get it. We exchange for that candy bar at the store because we want a candy bar eat, right? We exchange for a movie, want to watch a movie. It's because we want these sights and sounds to rush out to consume. We exchange for these things, plan for them. The trouble is that in consuming some of these things, it's kind of like pouring dye into the water. Consume a movie with a lot of explosions, a lot of effect. It's like taking the water and stirring it up. All of a sudden, we try to make our minds settle down to think, things seem unclear. Can't see to the bottom of the bowl. We exchange for some food that we're just really craving. We go out and grab that food, we chew it down, and we're eating it. It's great, our mind's somewhere else. But then when the time comes to make our mind settle down, it doesn't obey. It's kind of like having, some other type of dye in there. We sometimes just want to kind of veg out, let our minds just kind of go into a kind of state where they're not like a dull state, where it's all clouded over, just sleeping. This is like having kind of moss growing over on the bowl, kind of water plants growing over on the bowl. And so when we come to practice meditation, these are the things that we notice. We sit down. Bhante often talks about that, think we're going to sit down and have all this peace, and we sit down and we're thinking about things. What happened last week? I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that, Or excited, this great thing is coming up, But these are all the very things that pull our minds outwards, that stir up the water in the bowl, and that make it difficult to see to the bottom of the bowl. So the nice thing about when we learn to take our minds back to an object of meditation over and over again, we learn to take our minds back to the breath over and over again, we learn to take our minds back to metta over and over again. Whatever wholesome object of mind we've been learning about cultivating, when we do this, we're not actually sending our minds rushing out to consume. It's actually the opposite of that. We get that candy bar, we're out grabbing the candy bar to eat it. But when we pull our minds back to meditate, we're actually pulling them in, not necessarily sending them out. Not sending them out to the past, not sending them out to the future, just letting them be right here, to what's happening right now. And the nice thing about this kind of thing, it seems like a very simple practice, but for anybody who's probably been to more than one or two of Bhante's meditations, you kind of know that although it seems simple, there's a lot more to it, right? Yeah. But the nice thing is that as we continue to do this, we take our mind away from these external things, not right away, but gradually that kind of color in the bowl starts to settle. Now, gradually, the kind of dust, the dirt that's been stirred up in the bowl starts to settle. And when that starts to settle, what we can see after that is our reflection in the bowl. For that, we can look into the bowl and see what things look like. Whatever we hold up to the bowl gets kind of reflected back. And when we let our mind settle down in this way, in the same way, when we look at something, then we have a greater ability to access this kind of intuitive side of our mind. The side of our mind that knows what's right to do in just this situation. The side of our mind that isn't planning, the side of our mind that isn't thinking, but the side of our mind that understands. And the side of our mind that thinks is important too, not trying to downplay that, but in the West we think a lot, so we're going to emphasize this aspect. And when we continually do this, when we continually bring our mind back to this, what we notice is that as our mind rushes out, many of the things that we thought were wholesome are almost always chain linking to one of the things that makes us upset. That candy bar thought that we thought was so excellent, Thinking about the candy bar, it seems so tantalizing. The candy bar. Think about the candy bar, just as an example. You think about you're eating the candy bar, before you know it, you're thinking about when you were a kid, eating the candy bar. Then you're thinking about your brother when you were a kid. Then you're thinking about how your brother doesn't talk to you anymore. And now you're sad. And this is the way these kind of craving thoughts work. Think about this really amazing thing, and we're meditating, this amazing thing we've got to do next week. It's going to be amazing, Get out there, and we're going to get this project done at work. And we're in there, we go and grab onto that and consume it. We're in this world where we're finishing this project in record time. And then before you know it, after a while, you start to think, well, I better get this done for the project. Oh, what happens if I don't finish the project? Uh-oh. I wonder what my boss thought about me last week when I said X, Y, and Z. Am I going to lose my job? And this is the way that the mind links to these things. Often, there was one teacher who was, he would often say, the kind of mind is a liar. In other words, it doesn't tell us the truth about the exchange that we have to make to go out and consume things. We have this idea in our head about what consuming it's going to be like, but the exchange that we actually make to get it isn't what we bargained for. And so when this water settles down, when we learn to bring our mind back to the breath over and over again, when this thing starts to settle down, we can see this kind of process more clearly. This is one of the reasons why it's difficult to make the mind settle down. The Buddha teaches that it's kind of ignorance is behind it. It's kind of avidya, not knowing in terms of the Four Noble Truths. And it's because we don't know, it's because we don't see these kind of things that we keep running back to them. It's like somebody who has this kind of spouse, and they're just head over heels, head over heels in love with their spouse. But they're suspicious that their spouse is cheating, is not being faithful to them. And so at first, whenever somebody tells them, look, your spouse, I don't think your spouse is being faithful to you. Somebody that they trust. Now, I don't think your spouse is being faithful to you. Hey, I don't believe you. My spouse is great, And then that person starts to think for themselves, well, I better do a bit of investigating. And so they start to notice things, But it's only when that person, say, goes to a restaurant and sees maybe their spouse with the person they're dating, maybe holding hands, or, I don't know, snuggling or at the table, whatever it might be. And then that person knows, my spouse has been cheating on me. And then this kind of extreme love they felt for this person falls away. Because they know, they've seen for themselves, and they don't need other people to tell them. And our mind settles down. It's what leads us to be able to look for these clues. Look, the things that I think have been making me really happy, the things that I'm launching my mind out for, these things are linked to the things that make me sad. I'm going to investigate this. You know? When our mind settles down, we're in a position where we can notice these things. The Buddha is like our good friend, the person who tells us, look, sensual pleasures are of little happiness and much suffering. You know? We're in trouble with them. But it's only when our mind settles down like this, only when the intuitive aspect of our mind, the aspect that's able to notice, coupled with the rational aspect of our mind, the aspect that goes and investigates, that starts to pick up these clues, you know, that sees these things for ourselves. And the nice thing about seeing these things, when we learn to see these things for ourselves, is that's when what some of the teachers call letting go can occur. Kind of letting go isn't just something that happens because we think, I'd like to let go of my habit with candy bars. Here you go. Right? If that was the case, there would be no Weight Watchers. None of these things. It comes through effort. It comes when we really know and see these things ourselves. You know? And this effort is dependent on having these two aspects of our mind work in tandem. It's dependent on bringing our mind back again and again to a certain extent to make the water settle down. You know? It's dependent on having a solid foundation, on having this kind of intuitive aspect of our mind in our daily lives, so that we know when somebody needs help, we give it to them. When somebody needs something, when they need a rope, we give it to them. Even if it takes us off of our schedule, even if it takes us off of some of the parts of our rational mind, even if it takes us away from an economy of exchange. And so in these ways, the aspects of the Buddhist path link together. They link together from giving. They link together from giving, leading to this intuitive aspect of our mind. They link together from using this intuitive aspect of our mind to have our thoughts settle down. They link together when we use this intuitive aspect of our mind to shine our awareness on the things that are causing us to suffer. They link together when we investigate these things. And they link together when we see for ourselves the harm they've been causing. And the best way, one of the best ways they link together is when we're actually able to cut those things ourselves. Because this is the purpose of all this meditation, is to try to find a permanent way to end this running out here and there, seeking ever fresh delight. Try to find something that doesn't move around. You know? Something that doesn't quiver and shake when things that make people happy come, when things that make people sad come. There's looking for an aspect of our practice that isn't affected by this. Looking for an aspect of our practice that leads us to something that's unconditioned, that's happy no matter what. And so these are some of the ways that we can use these intuitive aspects of our mind, you know, to try to find something that's better than just the exchange economy, than just the money, than just the candy bars, than just the friendships, the relatives, you know, to try to find something inside, to try to find a peace that doesn't change.